Olá a todos.
Hello, everyone. I am Jorge Abreu. I am co-president of Brazil at Silicon Valley 2021. And it is an immense pleasure that I officially open our BSV digital conference. This year, our conference will take place throughout 3 days between today and Wednesday. We will have 16 speakers discussing 6 topics aligned to our mission: to support development and increase competitiveness in Brazil through technology. Throughout 2020 and 2021, 40 students, Brazilian students in California, from Berkeley and Stanford, with the support of a dedicated board with 6 professionals, worked hard amidst the pandemic to organize a number of events. We brought throughout 2021, among panels, podcasts, and newsletters, those who think, invest, who do entrepreneurship and execute and lead the Brazil that is doing well. Throughout the year, we had, for instance, leader investors in Brazil to talk about the technology scenario throughout the country, also international, social and governmental impacts, and more recently, national and international leaders from the educational sector for our Education Day, where we discussed the future of education. All this material and content can be found on our website, our YouTube channels, and other streaming platforms. Today, it is a pleasure to start our 2021 conference with important names to talk about agribusiness, the Amazon forest, and health. Tomorrow, August 10, at 4:45, we have our partner McKinsey opening our e-commerce with an overview of the Brazilian sector. On Wednesday, on August 11th, at 6 p.m. Brazilian time, we will conclude our conference talking about cryptocurrency and super apps. And before, to conclude, I would like to recognize the support of our sponsors who allow us to make this movement. They are Alta Diagnósticos, Bank of America, BTG Pactual, DASA, Global Ventures, Google for Startups, IBM, Institute d'Or for Research, Magalu, Pinheiro Neto Advogados, SoftBank, Stone, and Valor Capital. We would like to thank you all for your support. Without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Maria.
Obrigada, Jorge. Boa tarde.
Thank you, Jorge. Good afternoon. I welcome all of you to the first panel of a digital conference at Brazil at Silicon Valley. I am Maria de Castro Lima. I am an economics and environmental politics in UC Berkeley, and I'm part of the communication teams at BSV. To start our conference, I would like to introduce a panel, Technology and Innovation, the Opportunities in the Agribusiness. Throughout the last decades, agriculture has been the driving force for the Brazilian economy, but we are questioning the interface between agricultural production and the environment. Today, we have important names that have experience in research and development, agricultural production, investment in AgTech for an open and candid discussion on the main opportunities in Brazil. To kick off our first panel, I would like to thank and introduce Pedro Coelho. Pedro is a co-founder and CEO of Provivi, a company created with the Nobel Award winner Francis Arnold to create scalable solutions to control insects based on pheromone, improving the quality of life and reducing environmental impact. More recently, Provivi launched its first product in Mexico to control the fall armyworm, considered the worst disease for corn in the world. He did chemistry at Oxford University and has a PhD in chemistry at Caltech. Welcome, Pedro. Now, I would like to introduce our second speaker for this panel, Kriss Corso. Kriss is the agricultural director of the JCN Group, one of the national leaders in agricultural production with more than 90,000 hectares of planted area. Kriss is also the founder of Perfect Flight, a startup to monitor an aerial monitoring of plantations of production in order to have greater efficiency in agricultural production. He has done agronomy in the Regional University Center at Espírito Santo do Pinhal. Welcome, Kriss. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Luisa Zeviado. Luisa is a venture partner of the Yield Lab, a venture capital fund with more than 50 investments in AgTech, including 13 in Latin America. He's also a board member of Kemin Industries and DG Rodeo. Previously, he was executive at the multinational company Novus for more than 25 years. He spearheaded different functions in Brazil and Latin America and the US. He has graduated in veterinary sciences in the Federal University of Paraná and has an executive MBA at the Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome, Luis. And at the end of the panel, we will have a question and answers session. For those who are watching us, feel free to submit your questions through the YouTube chat. And for those who want to follow the transmission in English or in Portuguese, just click on the links below to watch in whichever language you wish. Now I pass the floor to Luis. Maria, thank you so much for your introduction. William, also, thanks for the invitation. It is such a pleasure to be here with you to talk to Pedro and Kriss. This is such an interesting topic, such a wonderful story, really, a success story in our country, which is agriculture, and all this transformation, this revolution that is happening in the agriculture and technology businesses. It is a pleasure to be here, and also the conference itself kicks off really well, I believe, because to talk about growth, innovation, and to tell a positive story, narrative, as we have heard so much in our country in these past few months, a positive narrative. Nothing better than to kick off this discussion with agricultural and technology, or AgTech, and the important role that Brazil has in the production of food and fuel, and also materials, raw materials and inputs. So it's a pleasure to be here with you and share this moment with Pedro and Kriss. In your introduction, Maria, you talked about the issue of agriculture and the environment. I guess this is a very important topic. It's a very relevant topic that needs to be discussed and debated. And even more so, we should offer a perspective that it's not either or, and how these two things can coexist, and how the message that Brazil is able to convey can be a positive message and not a message of having to decide between one and the other, if you're pro-agriculture or pro-environment. So this could maybe be an interesting topic for us to start. So Kriss, you bring with your experience not only the part of the entrepreneur, but also the rural producer. And it would be interesting to start this discussion with you giving us your vision. How do you see this? And maybe this great opportunity of having what they call a horse ready to be rode, in terms of Brazil being one of the driving forces of this business in the world. Well, first of all, thank you for your introduction. Thank you to all the team for the event by BSV. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This is a topic that is not only, no way back, but it's also a great opportunity both in agriculture in Brazil and the ag tech companies in Brazil. Of everything I know and of all the experiences within the JCN group we introduced related to good practices, environmentally speaking, we had results not only in sustainability, but also in economic terms, be it in terms of increasing productivity and the economy of different commodities, but since also with a clean energy, where we have solar panels and hydro plants, the wealth that Brazil offers to all types of investment, and also with new technologies. Once you improve the management and introduce good practices, this will also reflect and have consequences in terms of our carbon footprint, something that today, of course, is a hot topic. And I see that today, those who are really putting this into practice and being able to take this into their production sites are able to benefit from this. So this is the possibility that ag techs have. They bring this differential. They are able to attract investors. We were talking about market liquidity in terms of this market looking for this greater liquidity. So within this essence and this mission and these values, we are able to showcase not only science in productivity and economy, but also the most important part for our next and future generations. It is something that will certainly make a huge difference today to be able to not only to have our keep track of our production chain within our properties, but also in terms of our raw material and reaching all the way through the end user, having food at our consumer's table. So we have to have traceability of all these operations, what each one of these good practices could impact and bring about in terms of gains, be it in efficiency, be it in economy, productivity, and also with the sustainability aspect. You are able to, therefore, improve your chain and show throughout time how much you evolved and how much you still have to evolve. Many things that we already see that startups have positive ideas about, but also we see other technology companies that are able to implement everything in a practical manner. It's not just a matter of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Even the maturing we see in the field will take time to adapt. So until you're able to generate data and to offer more futuristic things, we know that the impact of good practices that are implemented have bring about gains in our daily lives, and then you evolve from that point into better data management and with intelligence and better recommendations to your business. So we have an enormous wave we need to surf, and this is how we are able to work in the agricultural business and spearheading this company, and a company that we helped create on technology. We are able to see these two things walking hand in hand, bringing benefits not only to the Brazilian agribusiness, but the worldwide business, and also to society in general that will end up being impacted by everything. Thanks, Kriss. Pedro, I would like to bring your perspective in terms of technology and all this discussion or this whole idea between agriculture and the environment. It's a pleasure, Luis. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria and BSV, Georgie, everyone for the invitation. It's such an honor to be here in this conference today. This issue of sustainability, environment, and agribusiness is, of course, a topic that I study, I research, and I think a lot about. I always like to go back to define what is sustainability, which is to be able to generate the necessary conditions for your business. We want, Kriss's grandson to have the same productivity that he has today in these farms in Mato Grosso and inland São Paulo. And for this to happen, we need to preserve. What do you need in order to produce food? You need land, you need water, you need sun, soil, and biodiversity. And I would like to focus my time here. And this last point is biodiversity. Lots of interesting things happening in terms of soil preservation, water rationing. But what I really like about this agenda is biodiversity. Biodiversity, why is it important to agriculture? Because we have to see biodiversity as an asset, because biodiversity in the fields will bring to the producer services, biological services, services that have to do with your ecosystem, where, for instance, you need to have pollination and the pollinizers to pollinize cultures that depend on that, such as fruits and vegetables. You need these insects that will do the decomposition of material. You have to have insects that are beneficial also to other issues and insects. So these insects are disappearing at a very high rate, faster than in before. So, eight times worse. So, based on data that were collected in Germany, in Costa Rica, in the US in the last 30, 40 years, the volume of insects reduced in terms of 80%, which of course is a lot and very hindersome. So if we consider that this will continue for the next 30, 40 years, we have to have and face this agenda head on. So, how are we able to manage the local decision making process? Half of the arable area in Brazil is already dedicated to agriculture. So, these decisions will certainly impact this whole ecosystem. The work that Provivi is doing is exactly to be able to align these two things, to have profitability, to have the sustainability, economic sustainability of the business in the long term, and at the same time preserve the biodiversity through tools that are proven and used in a niche agriculture, but with a greater democratization in terms of pheromone a tool, so that we can control selectively these pests without having impact on the delicate biodiversity, which is impacted when we visit these farms. We are able to witness, and this is also a topic that when you start tackling this issue, people aren't able to appreciate, because you always think of agriculture as monoculture, something that is homogeneous. But even in corn or soy or cotton, you have in terms of 70, 80 different types of insects, and most of these species are not pests. These are species that are doing something that is positive for the producers. So this is certainly a topic that I'm really passionate about, and it's a very important agenda for Brazil. And to talk about the preservation in Brazil, this is something that we have to face head on in a generational impact. Yes, it's wanted to have this perspective in terms of biodiversity, maybe this deep dive on this topic, and really showing this as a great asset that Brazil has in terms of agriculture, that agriculture has to be preserved because the business depends on that. Without that, you won't have the wheel turning for long. So maybe to conclude this topic, there's also an issue in terms of communication. Sometimes agriculture or the producer has a great difficulty of communicating this coexistence, the importance of sustainability in a broader manner, and also the importance it is for his or her own business. And sometimes the producer will sometimes sit in this box like the great villain, the bad guy in this equation, but maybe he is probably the most interested party in preserving the environment. It is the rural producer. So, Kriss, I would like to hear from you. What is your perspective? Well, this is one of the points I really like to reinforce and highlight. I guess we need to really show and convey that the producer who wishes to do something efficient and productive, we work with Provivi, we know that the potential there is in producing in the same area in a significant or even greater area than we already have, using a smaller amount of pesticides and defensives. And we see the possibility of this actually happening. All those that I see today who are evolving with a very competent management in the fields are totally followers of these good practices. Maybe you can, like in other sector in the world, be it in mining, be it in banks, investments, people that make a difference, people who actually are able to have a better fruit for the future. And I see that the risk of not working is much smaller. But there are others that will not be interested. They would just think that in his or her generations, they forget about the only thing about themselves. So they forget about their children or grandchildren and what they want from the future, sir. So I see that we see some media communication miscommunicating what is happening in the fields, but sometimes we rather fight with them than bring actual positive elements and statistics and data in terms of how much we have been reducing the number of pesticides with good practices in terms of fuel consumption. Also, when you have telemetry on your machine, when you have a good management of aerial pesticides, for instance, you see how much you gain in efficiency when you reduce in terms of fuel for that aircraft, how much you gain in sustainability. If you have a 70% increase efficiency from 70 to 90%, these are billions and billions, which not only Brazil with making mistakes, but also not only here that you have opportunities of gains. You can see where we are expanding to the US, to Latin America, to Australia, and the efficiency is the same. So when you do not have a management, a good management, you will be lacking elements to show that you are not reaching your ADP, you're not reaching maybe overdose or underdose, and consequently, the durability of the molecule will have a certain shelf life or half life that will have a greater efficiency. It really is like a medication in your drugstore. You might take it the right dose, or if you're taking the wrong dose of your medication. So these are good practices that are introduced in each one of these sectors, and from people who really want to do what's right. They want to produce, they want to feed the world, because of course this is necessary. You can't live in this utopia thinking that you are able to control the amount of pests that Pedro referred to without support. But there are many new things that are being created, good things that are being created, such as pheromones and biologicals, and the existence of good practices for production with new technologies to support a better productivity. So we fail in terms of communication, of being able to convey and educate correctly, to educate children, for instance, São Paulo, what you're eating today, why are you eating this? Because there are people who are doing right and doing it correctly. We had one example in the Ministry of Agriculture from the Netherlands coming here to get to know the revolutionary technology that do preserve the environment. And there are many doing this. They did this video to actually show that they were importing Brazilian food with all that criticism in Europe, especially in France. We know that it's more a commercial issue, trade issues with other interests. And so we see that sometimes it's a matter of miscommunication. So let's show what we're doing right. Let's show what we are harvesting, no pun intended. So we have to actually show data, statistical data, scientific data to show that, yes, we are the main producers in the world, and we have to be very careful, and that we are very careful with sustainability. Great, Kriss, a very positive message. Yes, and true, miscommunication, and because everything is actually happening. And if let's follow this topic. You started to talk about the your own companies. You know, Pedro talked about Provivi. You talked about Perfect Flight, Kriss. So maybe if we could do a double click here on your companies, and maybe if we could talk a little bit, you know, to our public about your companies, and maybe Pedro, if you could tell a little about your perspective. You know, recently you had a C series. You received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You did a tour here in Brazil, visiting producers with your technology. So tell us a little bit about your story, this context. Well, I am a chemist. by training. I have a scientific background, and in 2013, the first I had a solution trying to find a problem because we had interesting ideas in terms of how to synthesize complex molecules using biotechnology. It took 1 year until we found pheromones. And this was something that I found really captivating. The issue of pest control is an issue, of course, in agriculture. It is as old as agriculture itself. And it is a very difficult issue to deal with because you have to, at the same time, control pests in a selective way to preserve biodiversity. And you also have to meet the consumer's preferences because agriculture will employ less and less people. But at the same time, the output of our agriculture continues to be shipped around the world. So everyone will have a different point of view in terms of, trying to tell the farmer what to do about his work. So sometimes there's a disconnection. There's a lack of appreciation of the complexity of food production. From 2014 until now, when we actually focused all our efforts in the pheromone issue, we did the pre-A series, then the B series, and a C series, and the total of capital of $200 million. And we are now in this phase of transition between a laboratory to a company with commercial operations. And we produce this product in Europe and the US, and then we ship to our different markets in Mexico, in Europe, and this year we will be reaching Brazil and in Indonesia. So we want to do more or less two product launches every year to expand our portfolio because the complexity of our business pheromone is like each insect has a different pheromone. We have to develop products accordingly. So you have to have a great research and development and investment and investment. So in order to develop this and in order to really deliver value.
Legal. Kriss,
let's double click on the perfect flight and tell us a little bit about your plan of making the company international. How did you get here? What can you see in relation to the future? Well, in our case, it was really a pain for the producer in applying a gigantic quantity of pesticides and you not be able to track, see what the product is doing and the efficiency that really is reaching the target, which is the plant itself, to be able to control these pests. And we started to imagine how this could be inverted, not only analyze what was done, but also generate a plan for how this would be done. So guaranteeing that all this application respects the restricted areas, the water sources, the APPs. Today, we're the largest digitized area for application in the world with 80 million hectares. And what we see is, as I said, no matter if it's Brazil or Latin America or the US or Europe or even Australia, all the other countries, they have the same efficiency as Brazil. And what calls our attention is that it's 70% efficiency. So 30% of everything that's applied from the air has a dosage error or else it's thrown out. This, of course, compromises a lot of important areas, the bees, for example, which are so important for the pollen. So this issue that we were able to identify, this failure that we were able to correct with the software today, we are able to have this possibility of planning now and guaranteeing that the certification of areas that were before forbidden, now they have traceability. We can control these areas. We also had an investor who joined us, and he was very strong in this area, Rufino. He's an individual, and he and his son are part of the company. So they brought us a lot of growth with this experience that they had in the industry. So with relationships, with the regulatory part, everything that we really can do and can work together in at the environment and work together and expand more rapidly. And when we saw this opportunity and we saw that it would not only be in Brazil that we'd be able to add this type of technology, we opened this. We started in Argentina, Paraguay, Honduras, and today we also had an incentive from the University of Ames. So we really are not only in the commercial part, but also in research and development to generate this type of work in the United States. We have several areas. We have now a pilot plan for the first harvest, and have some, we're able to replicate this model. And what we built with the validation of the largest agricultural companies in Brazil, not only working in order to reach small and medium-sized producers, because as by the same token, we started monitoring the airplanes that apply and also helicopters and drones. So if there's this 10% human area failure, which is normal, the pilot, he is at low altitude, he has the risks of the low speed, but he is able to have a rate of 92% success. He generates an automatic map, and the drone also applies in the same areas, and we also do all this drone management. So it's a huge opportunity to expand this to countries that are investing a lot and bringing this ally to agriculture. So I think these are the main points. Getting into the US and developing this in that country, it's a new reality, it's a new cultural way of doing things, very much with scientific works, with partners as universities being able to validate and demonstrate the opportunity of producing, of being efficient, if performance, higher productivity, and guaranteeing that the environment is not affected. Yeah, that focus on the improvement of productivity that you are focusing on, which is fundamental, this sustainability, it's a key part of the ecosystem in innovation. So in this sense, I'd like to benefit from our last few minutes before we open to Q&A for a conversation about ecosystem and what is your vision. So as you know, we are investors, and so we have a network of world funds and that invests on the ag-food tech. So there's an interesting peculiarity of combining the knowledge of this area with the knowledge of venture capital and putting things together for investments. As Maria said, we have 3 investments here in Latin America, and there's a perspective, a very optimistic perspective.
Pelo tamanho, pela importância da agricultura,
so due to the importance of the diversity,
com essa produtividade que vocês estão comentando, né, que os ciclos estão mais curtos, né, os ciclos agrícolas,
the cycles are shorter,
no Brasil, mas é também
and it's also an ecosystem that's full of problems, full of idiosyncrasies, of opportunities of disruption, which is very interesting for venture capital because you combine the size of the market and the disruption opportunities. I'd like you to comment, if you will, a bit of the vision. You talked about productivity, technology, in the production areas, perhaps technology outside the area. How do you see this? What are you doing? And how is this innovation ecosystem, how is this innovation taking place? Pedro, would you like to start? Look, Luis, I think an ecosystem basically is people, money. Money, I mean risk capital, investors that go early into the game. So I believe that in this case, what we benefited from this ecosystem in California, we have this knowledge which already works. So instead of you applying an insecticide that's going to kill everything, you can use the pheromone of the species and control just that. So it's expensive, and if you're able to produce this in a cheaper way, and if you're able to formulate it so it can be applied with a tractor, with a airplane, you'll be able to join this market. But of course, there was a risk, right? So, wow, are you going to be able to produce it? Is the farmer going to use it? What value is this going to generate? How's this formulation? How long is it going to last? So, is this going to work in Brazil, in the US, in Mexico? So there were several risks that you have to manage, and systems, CLB, CLA. So the money, the value of the company grows, and you're able to launch the product, which is what we did in Mexico and in Europe. And I was very happy with our preparation, because there are a lot of thousands of startups of AgTech in Latin America, because I think that's very good news for all of us, because it is a sector that needs more innovation. So in this point, outside the production area, I think that for Brazil to be competitive, we have to do two things at the same time. We have to invest the 21st century in the 21st century, which is what we're doing with technology. And we also have to make the investments of the 20th century that have been delayed, which is investments in infrastructure, trains, for us really to be able to bring the maximum value back to the farm, because it makes no sense to lose all of this, and the final consumer or the person that's going to consume this product, wherever he may be. But I think there is a different role of the entrepreneur in both cases. And since we're here focusing on what we can do and also what the government could be doing, we have to have an optimistic vision of everything, and bring this technology, this innovative spirit, this technological spirit, and overcome these barriers.
Well,
if you don't mind, I'd like to borrow this statement that you made about the 21st century and the 20th century, because I thought this is a very good way to illustrate things, because we really do have a lot of problems from the 20th century, perhaps the 19th century, to be solved here in Brazil. Kriss, here we have in our investment thesis, we've seen that perhaps trying to find what would be this disruption catalyzed. And we think that the AgFinTech is part of this disruption. It is an important part of it. And we believe that all this traceability that we talked about right in the beginning of our conversation is also quite powerful. So what is your perspective as a rural producer? Well, I believe that everything that brings management, and we'll be able to do this, but to be able to put all these things together in an organized fashion I say that we have some steps to evolve. First of all, we have to organize in-house, identify what your failures are and start to correct them. And I see that everything that is arriving at the market related to this as a set ends up by bringing us much more security, whether it be the ERP, new integrated technologies. This is a point that I like to mention because I think that if Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were in Brazil, they'd have huge difficulty to be successful as they were, not due to the lack of intelligence, but because of intellectual property, the respect for this, and the protection of the of geniuses like them or businessmen like that. So one of the big concerns that I'd like to bring to the table, especially in relation to the ecosystem, for example, if you're not in the middle of serious people, and I say this because we started the perfect flight, I think, in the best way possible, in a hub, uh, able to work with a giant of the national and international market to validate our product. We already had some tests, but what was very important for this growth of the company, to know other companies, other serious companies that would be able to give us a level of integration. Because today, if you're going to talk about applications, you have to talk about the climate, you have to generate a recommendation on the speed of the wind, the temperature, to apply a certain product, and a series of other things that you have to move forward with these other serious companies, because you register the software, but the patent is something that you get outside. So the growth and the agility that you have inside this ecosystem, this guarantees to you that you will be able to expand your business. You'll bring new technologies where these failures exist and really be able to aggregate to agro in a much quicker way. So you see everything that's um, being highlighted. There are a lot of disrupted futuristic technologies, but they're going to take a while until they mature and obviously bring the benefits that any good ideas bring. Some of them are very simple, very practical, that solve huge problems. So with this exchange of information, the communication, sometimes you help to correct and you are helped to correct. This allows you to shorten the route, and you make the risks less difficult. So I think it's putting all of this together, the fintechs arriving. We've seen that this works in relation to who opened the banks up, bringing new visions of the market, giving to the final client new experiences, new ways of making money. So I can see that all of this is taking place in agro. I think it's happening even faster than I imagined. The beginning of the 4.0 revolution, and now talking about ESG together. So we are on the right track. And I believe that good people, good companies will be able to do this, will be able to walk the walk, and that we have more and more people that believe in this level of technology, investors such as you, and so many others that we see that are utilizing this capital, but that are getting things right more than making mistakes. Because in Brazil, as in other places in the world, a lot of good things are happening. And these benefits are for us who are on the production side, but even more so for society in general and for the next generations in the case of preserving the environment. So I think this is a focus, and it's a way with no return. And if we are able to do this, then Brazil knows no boundaries. Well, thank you very much, Kriss. I think uh, it's very interesting, and your closing comments were very good, and what Pedro said. And now I believe that we can open for the questions and answers.
Muito obrigada, Luiz.
Thank you very much, Kriss, Luis, and Pedro, talking about these topics that are so current and so important and that have to do with our future, right? The technology, innovative methods to promote all of this, and agriculture production and taking care of the environment. But now we're going to start then questions and answers, and we have a few questions that our team chose, and you can send your questions through the chat on YouTube during the whole session. But to start, our first question that comes from the public comes from Pedro Pereira. And he says, agro industry, 20% of the GDP. The sector is full of opportunities. Brazil has a huge volume of venture capital, but we don't have agro unicorns. What is lacking to reach or to have this? So this question is a general question. Any one of you can answer. Well, everyone is searching for this unicorn. I think perhaps the first comment from the perspective of an investor, well, I think the ecosystem for innovation here in Latin America is still very young. To give you an idea, we arrived in Latin America in 2018, and at that time, we still found the innovation was still more advanced in Argentina than in Brazil. And during these last years, this ecosystem has evolved very fast. This maturity, capacity of the teams, and what's happening now, and I think this is the big transformation that we're seeing, is that innovation is going from a search of to agronomic technologies, bringing some ideas, some general ideas from other areas to find innovation and disruption to more specific situations, perhaps using Pedro's words, these problems of the 20th century. And this perhaps will accelerate a lot, not only the unicorns that perhaps will come from this traceability, the agrofin test. This is a strong thesis that we have, but also transforming and catalyzing other innovations within. It's very difficult for a producer to innovate if he has a limitation of resources. So we can see that this transformation, this disruption, perhaps will come from the outside. Can I move on with the next question, or would anyone like to add anything to what was said? Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the next question. It's from Marina. She's from our team from BSV. And the question is how to guarantee that the new agro technologies are also accessible to the smaller producers. Well, I'd love to respond to this question. Well, we in Provivi, we have a pilot program together with the foundation of Bill and Melinda Gates, which is basically a copy of the idea of Tom's shoes. So if you go to the store of Tom's shoes and you buy a pair of shoes, the company donates another pair of shoes to a child that needs these shoes around the world. So what we're doing for each hectare that we sell, we have the internal commitment of creating a mirror of another hectare that we're going to develop cost price together with the foundation. We're doing this in India, Kenya, and Bangladesh for corn and rice, respectively. So this is important. Why? Because the majority of the poor population are also small producers, and the majority of producers in the world, in any case, are poor. So using a Silicon Valley term, we want to leapfrog these smallholders so that they don't have to go with insecticides on their backpack. We want to give them, they're going to get a biodegradable pheromone last generation product, go straight to these producers so we can have this impact. That's the beauty of the agro sector. A lot of challenges, fragmentation, the harvest, but the beauty of it is the size of the industry, the impact, and you're able to touch lives. So within limitations of being a startup and a company that's starting, we have this in our DNA, and it's part of our strategy to guarantee that this part of this will be accessible to everyone that needs these products.
Tá bom, para fechar,
well, to close, I have a question, perhaps for Kriss. The question comes from Tomasz Kowinski. The technology and innovation initiatives are transition opportunities, but we still have to advance. What do we still have to advance in order to implement them? I think taking the cue, we can make a comparison with what Luis says and what I think is very important. There are opportunities and there's a lot of things, perhaps a process of maturing in Brazil in relation to becoming a unicorn. A lot of technology has come sort of, which was made personalized to other countries and other parts of the world, different to our agriculture, which is a very humid agriculture. So I think that when we answer what Pedro said, how can we take this technology to the small and middle-sized producers? Perhaps we should incentivize them to create the technology for the problems that he has. So the idea is, what is my problem? Is there something that I can do? Is there some control level, some traceability, something that's going to give me a gain? Because the maturing process was so affected with this type of technology that did not come prepared to our reality, that a lot of people have closed to the new technologies due to these products that were not good for us. These were products that had nothing to do with our necessity, and they had to be adapted. They had to undergo changes with the process, and some were able to adapt to our reality and our market, but others, where you have a problem, and when you identify this problem with the possibility that you really are going to have something disruptive. So perhaps several companies are going to leave Brazil without being successful, or they're going to have to adapt and change to our reality. So I see that there are opportunities all over the world. This other part that we defend a lot, that everyone should have access to technology, but perhaps the technology of the large and the huge producers not adequate for the small and medium-sized producer, but perhaps what we can do is bring this and help this, and within these ecosystems and cooperatives, what is in my experience that I can add to someone else's and transform this into a good commercial idea? I think these are the points. I think there are huge opportunities in our context, things that we really can bring, positive things for agriculture. So this exists, and it also depends on us to filter, choose the best, and be able to make this have positive results and generate the best engagement possible. Thank you. Thank you, Kriss. That's the last question, and we're now ending. questions and answers. But before we end the panel, I want to thank Kriss, Pedro, Luis. It was a huge pleasure to have you all with us. And thank you very much for sharing your experiences and give us some insights of this agro-techno sector in Brazil. I would also like to thank all the sponsors who make this event take place. I want to thank the audience for the support, for following us, and for engaging with our content, whether it be with your presence, whether it be your events or your questions and your engagements on the social media. And I'd like to ask you to follow our next panel, which will be consumer-led healthcare. And we will have Florian, Otto, Karim, Jacob, Manuela, Mitchell, Henrique, our host from BSV. We will now talk about innovations in the health area that have to do with the consumer, talking about CEDAR and other platforms for patients. So to access this, you can click on the link that we've just shared on the chat. And that's what I had to say, and see you soon.